I've already made a video on how God meets us where we're at. That's how God is. He is so amazing. He is grand. He is bigger than life. But yet he has a way of coming and meeting with the smallest of the smallest and with each and every one of us. And he meets us right where we're at because he knows that it's very hard for us to meet him where he's at. And because of that, he does most of the work for us. So on a spectrum here, if you are like in your spiritual walk and in your, spiritual identity as a child, then he's going to come and meet you right here where you're at. And as a child, children have a lot of wrong ideas, but the parents still love them. And it's through maturation, it's through development, it's with life skills that they begin to develop, correct ways and thinking processes as they grow up to be an adult. In like manner, that's what we're doing in our own spiritual walk. And that is if we are, say, we're 40 years old and we just started to come into relationship with God, we're starting as a child. And there's a lot that goes into that. And so God's going to meet you as a child. And you could be wrong about many things, but he doesn't care. He just knows that he's going to meet you. And if you're at this level, say just, beginning to walk as a toddler would, but you're beginning to just understand these things, he's going to meet you there. Whereas in another person on a very different spectrum, said that they have been walking with God for a very long time, they're at a very different place. And so God's going to meet them at where they're at and begin to move them along in their spiritual journey. So everyone's at various different places. And God understands that. That's very normal and that's life. Not all of us can be at the same place. And because of that, God will meet each one of us right there where we're at, even when we're wrong, even when we have really bizarre ideas and concepts because of our background, because of what, Christianity has taught us, all of these things. But at some point, even in this wide spectrum, at some point and along the way, just like a child has to throw away things that, that's not true, it's exactly the same with us as we're moving along in our journey with God. Those things, those false belief systems, beliefs that, we've held on to because of false doctrine that was based on man's tradition. Maybe it fit for, 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, but that's not really universal truth. We're going to have to really deal with that, because what if you found out that a doctrine that's been taught for, centuries upon centuries is not true, because the translators and also the spiritual leaders misquoted or didn't quite understand, and they created a whole way of life around that one doctrine. That's very key, because that will determine, will people continue to follow that tradition even though it's not true? Or are they going to follow what the Bible says? And if they follow what the Bible says, and that's what Christianity says, is that, hey, we base our beliefs on the Bible, then you have a problem here. People have to make a decision. Am I going to continue to believe these doctrines? And some of these are real big ones, real foundational, but it's not found in the Bible. You're going to then have to go through a process in your mind, in your mindset of like, okay, do I still believe that? Why did I believe that? Why did I think that that was okay? Why does my denomination or my church, why do they continue to believe that? And how can so many people believe the wrong things? These are the kind of questions you're going to ask, and it will create cognitive dissonance, because if you're now surrounded by family and friends that have a very different belief system, but they're saying they believe the Bible, you've studied the Bible and it doesn't say that, and they're not willing to change, the church is not willing to change, the denomination isn't willing to change, Christendom isn't willing to change, How do you deal with that? And especially if you feel like you're being ostracized or you're, kicked out, or you're not connecting and you're not resonating, you're not in the same mind frame. How does one deal with that? And that's going to create a whole new level of, how do I define church? How do I define Christianity? What does that mean for me? See, this is a deconstructive path. And I'm telling you, as you begin to ask these types of questions, you're going to grapple and you're going to wrestle with God. You're going to wrestle with the scriptures. You're going to wrestle with church history. You're going to wrestle with biblical history. And it's going to make you even better, if anything at all, because through it all, no matter what, even if you've been wrong, and God is still with you. God will never leave you or forsake you. He is still with you in that process. And as your mind is growing, your intelligence is growing, as you're becoming better at research and that new data is coming in, and we're recognizing what this text and that verse and that biblical passage is actually saying, we're going to have to make some changes if you are a truth seeker. Now, if you are a tradition keeper, then none of what I just said doesn't matter one bit, and you're just going to continue to go where you're at. And that's fine if that's where you want to be. That's totally up to you and your choice. But my point here is that God always meets everybody where they're at, even when they're wrong. And God will deal with you and work with you in that. And sometimes it takes a very long time. And for some, they never move out of that. Just like a lot of people, they just stay the same and they never change and they don't want to. Okay, well, then that's their choice. But there are a few of us that are constantly growing, especially if you're a life learner and you're constantly growing and you're asking these kinds of questions because you are a truth seeker and not a tradition keeper. God bless you.